just me and Craig. Matt Brown, publisher of Extra Points, joins us now. And by the way, guys, the irony of having the dude who's the best at writing about NIL and all the things that go into NIL and the changing world of college athletics right out of GXG, our sponsor, who's an NIL collective, is not lost on me. I did think that was kind of strange. But Matt, there you go. Like, in the brave new world of college athletics, here you are on a podcast that has NIL as a sponsor.
You are not the first time this has happened. Honestly, when I was listening to the ad read coming in here, I'm like, well, that's pretty good. It sure beats somebody playing Fat Bottom Girls before I come up again or something, right? Or making some kind of quip about my gym performance. No, yeah, it would make sense for me to come on after talking about NIL.
Matt, this is the last night of the Pac-12 football-wise, and they could end it literally winning the title from their deathbed. How, like, as someone who likes to take the 30,000-foot view of college athletics, do you view that very strange possibility that could happen tonight?
It's funny. I have thought about this, and it is this terrible irony that the last season of the Pac-12 was its best and deepest in at least 15 years. It was one of the most exciting. It had the highest Q score, and if maybe just a couple of university presidents had done something slightly differently over an 8-month period, we're talking about it catapulting into a new era rather than being picked apart for parts. This would be very fitting, I think, for Washington to win this on not just the last day of the Pac-12, but really the last day of the college football, I think, as we know it right now. Because next year, brothers, this is a conference game, and we have to kind of wrap our minds around nationalized conferences and a Big Two, Little Two, this expanded playoff, a very different world. I think it would be fitting if things get sent off here with the last hurrah of the Pac-12. Matt, and not just because I'm from Columbus.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there you go. There's extra reasoning there. But, Matt, if it doesn't work out that way and folks in Columbus don't get their wish, then you got a team whose head coach was suspended this year, who's had this off-the-field drama going on for the last several months, and that's somewhat simmered down, although it still perks its head up from time to time. Just your thoughts on Michigan's ride to the championship game tonight, all that's taken place, and what kind of a taste do you think that leaves an administrator and greater college football world's mouth if Michigan, the team that was the big fat cheaters and this and that, is the one hoisting the trophy at the end of this whole thing?
I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some people that are going to, roll their eyes at it or be upset about it. But for everything that Michigan is accused of doing, and they probably are responsible for much of that, the idea that we've had pristine national champions or over the last decade is of course ridiculous, right? I mean, we saw this a little bit with the Auburn Cam Newton situation. We've seen this with several other teams that were not closely following the NCAA's amateurism guidelines over the past 150 years of national championships. What makes this, I think, different is that Michigan isn't being accused of recruiting cheating. They're not being accused of academic cheating or standard boilerplate cheating. It's a very unprecedented, weird, unique kind of cheating, and one where it's even a little bit nebulous to show what kind of advantage they got. And in the most Michigan way possible, there's a ton of lawyers, and it's Byzantine and difficult to follow. And a lot of this, I think, kind of becomes moot because there's a good chance, not a certain chance because we're talking about Jim Harbaugh, but there's a good chance this is his last game coaching. He's brought on a new agent. He's going to look at NFL opportunities. This is a very senior-laden team, a very experienced team that's going to lose over a dozen guys to the NFL draft. Whatever NCAA sanctions happen, if they're still in NCAA when it's time to pass these things out, they'll happen. But the people responsible for this team aren't going to be in Ann Arbor, I think, when it does.
Matt, one of the other pieces of news that came out today is they've kicked the can down the road on the 5+7 model. Apparently at the request of Kirk Schultz in Washington State, because they're trying to get their ducks in a row. It is an interesting debate for the ACC and Big 12, in my opinion, to get on the side of 5+7 or stay on 6+6, because if you do 6+6, then you're guaranteeing one less SEC or Big 10 spot, but you're also giving up a spot for yourself that could be an at-large bid. So where do you think that those schools, especially the ACC and Big 12, will fall on this in what will probably be a years-long battle against those other two conferences to make sure that there's fair representation in the postseason?
That is, honestly, I'd never really thought about it that way. And that is an interesting question. My understanding, and I haven't had a chance to read everything that Ross put out today, but my understanding was that it's expected that this eventually ends with a 7+5 kind of situation, or four automatic bids or 5 automatic bids rather than 6, and it's just a legal process or a bureaucratic process with Wazoo trying to extract as much leverage as they possibly can. But I think, and I'm open to being talked out of this by you guys, but I think if you're a Big 12 team, you want as many at-large bids as possible. It's going to be difficult, I think, in this new world here for ACC and Big 12 teams to compete for oxygen against the Big 10 and the SEC for automatic bids. I mean, looking at the playoff this year, I think if we go to a 12-team model, I don't think anybody in the Big 12 gets one of those spots. You got to go a little bit farther down to get to Arizona to get into that neighborhood. And as conference schedules expand, it may be harder for Big 12 teams to get enough quality games and have to move kind of uphill for that. So I think you want to preserve as many at-large bids as you possibly can, hoping that in a good year you can get 2 and maybe a third one, rather than trying to make the playoff field a little bit easier for your championship by kicking in a Sun Belt team. I could be wrong, but that's kind of how I think about it at first blush.
Matt, how have you sort of digested all of the Florida State ACC noise here over the last few weeks as that's continued to develop?
It's been tough to handle. It's been a tough story to kind of track. What I can tell you guys is that, on my to-do list, I did take a little bit of time off for Christmas. But one of the stories that I really want to do soon with real reporting is to tackle the private equity angle. And I want people to understand why Florida State would need or would want to go after private equity to raise this kind of money. And then more importantly, the risks and the what comes with taking that. Because it's a very different model than just going to a bank and getting a loan or trying to raise it with private fundraising, which I feel very confident is not possible for anybody here. When I've talked to a couple of high-level ACC staffers, I've talked to a few other high-level people at individual schools, and I don't think anything's really changed over the last month. If there was a very easy, foolproof way for this to be addressed in the court system, it would have already happened. And now it's a lot of lawyering. It's trying to figure out, okay, can we get the case moved to a geography that's more favorable to us? What parts of these terms can we strike? And what does this mean for the league as a whole? I think it's better for college sports if the ACC wins. And if Florida State is able to do this, or if they're able to get private equity financing, to get JP Morgan or the Saudis or somebody else to buy them out, I would be concerned about what that not only means for the ACC, but for a lot of teams like Baylor or in the Big 12 that are going to find their neighborhood suddenly much less stable.
Well, Matt, the thing that, if you go and you take the loan out, like you said, and you get that money or you raise it, then it's your money. But if you go and do that with a private equity firm, then JP Morgan or the Saudis are your boss. And then
that's exactly it.
That changes everything, because now you have to kind of let them do what they want as opposed to what you want, and you just hope your situation is they're giving me money to let me do what I want and they're going to stay out of the way. But that's for that kind of money, that's rare.
That's generally not how things work, right? And here's the thing. You're probably not going to be able, based on what I've been hearing so far, to just go to a bank and get $500 million. Because part of the challenge here is that, Florida State moves to Big Ten of the SEC. They're going to make a lot more television money. But we remember, we're also looking at a college sports landscape where costs are about to go up significantly for almost everybody. If you're like, okay, well, I've got $145 million in athletic revenue and I have to pay my athletes $0. And then in 2026, suddenly I have to pay my athletes $60 million or $50 million. Well, suddenly that gigantic mortgage looks a little bit more risky. Just like if you took out bought a $800,000 house and probably got laid off. The bank is going to look at that and think that might be a little bit riskier than we thought. Private equity will look at that and think we can still function there we're just going to have to cut a whole hell of a lot of stuff, or we're going to push you to do some things that you wouldn't want to do otherwise. And when that kind of thing happens, it probably won't be Florida State football that suffers, but it will be other Florida State athletes, and I think it will be consumers and fans of Florida State athletics. It's just not a Pandora's box. I think anybody should be really excited about opening, even if you might be a short-term beneficiary of it.
Is the best hope for Florida State that they kind of Clarence Darrow the heck out of this thing in court and prove some sort of flaw in the grant of rights that would then free them to not have to do private equity? They could just negotiate a buyout like everybody else has and move on.
Yeah, I think that is certainly what they would prefer to do, right? And I talked to a couple of attorneys. I need to report this out a little bit more, but I've had a couple of people tell me, there may be a legal argument for saying that this penalty is excessively punitive and it could open up the doors for a different negotiation. And if it's $200 million instead of $500 million, you might be able to get that from a bank. Or if it's $150 million, that's a lot of money, but you might be able to get that without having to give up equity, or without having to give up partial control over some of your assets. And if if the ACC gets $200 million, that might be able to buy you a little bit of flexibility with ESPN. How likely that is right now, I would need to do more reporting. This is the kind of thing I've joked with people like, I never went to law school. I didn't sit for the bar. But I have had to write so much about antitrust, labor law, and now contracts that I think I should be able to sit somewhere. Yeah. This is not what I signed up for when I started this newsletter, but that's what it is to be on this beat these days.
Yeah, no kidding, man. There's a lot of times where I just make it I'm not a lawyer, so I might be wrong on some of these things. But yeah, there's so much legalese and things like that it seems like we've all had to learn or adjust to over these last few months and a couple of years. Yeah. Matt, I know you touched on this in your newsletter. For those that don't subscribe or what have you, you definitely promote that as much as you want. But in there, here, I guess it was today, you did touch on the new NCAA TV deal that was announced at the tail end of last week. What was just sort of your main takeaway from that? And for those that want to dive a bit further on your writing on that in the newsletter, go ahead and throw that out there for folks as well.
Well, sure. Far be it from me to turn down a chance to shill for myself, right? Friends, I did write about 2,000 words on this at extrapointsmb.com. You can find me at Twitter at MattBrownEP. But I kind of think that the main takeaway here is I think this is a good, but it's not a great deal for the NCAA. And the big kind of public, I think, takeaway is, hey, it's great that the NCAA tripled the value, or more than 3x the value of their championship package here. But women's basketball was projected 2 years ago to be worth between $80 and $110 million annually alone. And in this package, it's valued at in the 60s. And my best understanding here is one, that initial valuation was probably a little bit generous, but for the NCAA to kind of carve out women's basketball and charge as much as they possibly could for it, the marketplace told them, you can do that, but that will mean that nobody's going to want to broadcast the rest of your stuff. And the NCAA member institutions in those conferences felt it was really important to make sure that men's hockey and women's lacrosse and college softball and everything else has access to linear television opportunities for their championships. If this is professionalized completely, maybe that's not necessarily the case, but this is the trade, right? That the NCAA decided we want to make more money so we can give NCAA tournament unit payouts to women's basketball. We can have some more money to give to to pay for our legal defenses, but we're not going to make as much as we possibly can because we still care about broadcast equity for everything else. So if you're a volleyball fan, pretty cool. If you're a swimming fan, pretty cool. If you're Dawn Staley, I get maybe why you're not thrilled.
Matt, we have you on to talk about the issues around things so much. We never actually get into the blood and guts of football with you that much. But tonight is a super interesting matchup. Michigan and Washington. It's two teams that have not been in this position for a very long time. Here they are in the national championship stage. How do you think this game shakes out tonight?
Man, the game, I think this is such an interesting game. And I'm trying to separate my Ohio-ness from this, right? And just look like, all right, we got two teams here that I think are constructed a little bit differently from a lot of other championship caliber teams you've seen recently, because these teams are old, right? Mm-hmm. They recruited well, but they didn't recruit like Alabama. They didn't even recruit like Texas A&M, but they hit on the transfer portal, and they got a bunch of seniors and redshirt seniors and COVID guys. They have, I think, individually very fun stars. And this is a fun, I think, strength-on-strength matchup, right? Because I don't think Michigan has seen anything close to the passing offense and the depth at wide receiver from Washington. That Washington has here, not even from Ohio State. And I don't think Washington fully understands what they're in for at the line of scrimmage. So we get to see kind of a fun strength thing here, right? Can Penix play as well as he did against Texas, knowing he's never going to have more than 3 seconds to throw the ball and he's going to have a hobbled running back? If he can, I think the Huskies beat anybody. I think Michigan wins because I look at that roster. I think that they have more pathways to win. I don't think Washington can win if Penix is just average or just okay, whereas I think Michigan can overcome a bad game from Blake Corum or J.J. McCarthy. But I think it's a fun game, and I think it should also be a positive development if you're at a place like Utah or Baylor or Arizona State or Penn State or some of these other places that can't recruit like Ohio State or Georgia, and realize, okay, now we have a proof of concept of what a roster, the best case scenario looks like for a roster like ours that can win a national championship. And I think that's good for college football.
Matt Brown, Extra Points. Matt, thank you so much. Every time we get you on, I'm smarter. I think our audience is as well.
I appreciate it, fellas. I appreciate all of your support. Enjoy the game here this evening. We'll catch up with you guys later.
All right. Matt Brown, Extra Points, one of the best guests you can get on a podcast.